Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are back with another edition of the educational speedrun series. So let's jump right into the action with a 10-minute rapid game, and off we go.
Zooming through the game with a bomb cloud start, trashing all your prep like it's modern art. Night on the rim, he'll still find the win. Chat's going wild, bro thinks he's Hikaru again. Oh hey hey, he's smurfing play by play, beats you blindfolded, still sipping latte. Queens are flying, eagles meet defeat. Just another speed run on Hikaru Street.
Okay, so we have the black piece in the first game. My opponent plays e4. Let's play our classic Sicilian defense right here. We get knight c3. Okay, so my opponent does not play f4 here. They play knight c3. Now, if I presume my opponent's going to play a Grand Prix attack, the system I'm going to go for is I'm going to play g6 and bishop g7 right away. Bishop c4. Okay, let's go bishop g7. Idea here is that I control the diagonal. You get knight to f3. And now let's bring out the knight to c6. Now, I could have played knight c6 and then g6, bishop g7 as well. So the order doesn't really matter that much. Mostly it's about getting a position. My opponent castles. And now we have the big decision of how I develop this knight on g8. Now, I could go knight f6, but white potentially can play e5 to attack the knight. I can also play d6 first, followed by the knight maneuver so that this pawn thrust isn't available. Or I could also play e6, knight e7 and try to play for d5 as well. So there are a lot of options here. All three moves are playable. I think what I'm going to do in this position is I'm going to go for the safest approach. I'm going to play d6 first, stop e5, and then I'm going to bring the knight out. Bringing the knight out first would also be completely reasonable. Really a fielder's choice, for lack of a better way of putting it. But I think for those of you guys watching the video, it's very important you don't allow your opponent to disrupt your development harmony at the beginning of the game. And if you were to play knight f6 and they go e5 and you don't know exactly what to do, there's a very good chance you're going to lose the game. So we bring the knight out, pawn and the knight stop white from pushing forward. We get knight e5. Now this is interesting because I think I can actually take this pawn and drop back. So if I take the pawn, let's see, we get rook e1, knight back. This knight guards the pawn. Get d3. Okay. Aha. Now if I take with the bishop, my opponent can try to play bishop h6, I guess. I don't really believe in it, but maybe. It would hang a pawn on b2. If my opponent doesn't play bishop h6, though, I get to complete my development very happily here. I simply have 8 pawns on the board. My opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This opening has been a complete bust for my opponent. So let's go bishop to d7. e6 was also fine as well. Let's go e6. I'll take with the bishop. The reason that I played bishop d7 first here as opposed to e6 is that I didn't want to get my pawns stacked on top of each other. I didn't want this double stack, so that's why I moved the bishop first. Now if takes, I will take with the bishop, and all these pawns will remain on their original files. So we got bishop b3. Okay, now I'm up a pawn here. The main issue that I have is how to trade pieces or open up the position. It's not very easy to do that here because I have all these pawns, very closed, only this one open file. So I think I'm going to start by playing knight to e5. Now when I play knight to e5, there are a couple of purposes behind this move. First of all, I'm up in material. I have one extra pawn on the board, so I'm happy to make these even trades. Secondarily, by moving this knight, I can also put this bishop on this really nice diagonal as well. I'm never really, if we look at this position, I'm never really going to push the pawn because of this diagonal opening up. So it makes sense to try and develop the bishop on this diagonal. Let's drop the bishop back. Put the bishop on c6. Maybe there's some kind of threat on the diagonal, maybe not, but it's a good start. So we got to move bishop to e3. So I'm going to play bishop c6 again, put this bishop on this great diagonal. My pawns here are pretty solid. They're very stable, so I really want to use this diagonal if possible. So we get rook d1, logical move. I think I'm going to play a5, just try to attack this bishop. Let's go a4, attack the bishop. Probably we get bishop c2, maybe bishop c4. Get bishop c4 logical. Okay, so now if I don't trade, white's going to take this pawn. I mean, I could play queen e7 to guard the pawn this way. I think I'm just going to trade the pawn. Why not? Probably will get bishop takes. Yeah, that's what I expected. Let's just go d5, try to reinforce this pawn structure. I'll pre-move king takes bishop. Okay, so now there's has been some simplification. I have one extra pawn still on the board. Still no open files really. That's actually a very bad move because now I can go queen f6 and the bishop's still under attack here. So my opponent's gonna have to trade, and now we're actually in an end game, and so now I have a lot of time to start trading off the pieces here with the extra pawn. So we get the trade. Okay, so one extra pawn here. I've got 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. My opponent is 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now what I'm going to do in this position is I'm going to push this pawn, and the main reason I'm going to push this pawn is that if my opponent were able to put this pawn on a3 here, this pawn can become a permanent target. In fact, as we look at all my pawns here, they are on the same color as this bishop. So if white could put the pawn here and move the bishop, white could target this pawn forever. And when I go a3 here, my opponent almost certainly is going to push the pawn forward, but it's going to create this weakness here on the c file, because now this pawn doesn't guard any longer. I've really loosened it up. We get c4, and now at this point I'm very happy, because what's going to happen is these files are both going to open, and my two rooks are on the perfect place squares to infiltrate on these open files in the next move or two. Actually, I missed c5. To be fair, I completely missed that c5 was a move. Actually a very good move. Okay, I guess I'm going to go b6 here. I'm going to temporarily sack a pawn. My opponent will take. I'll play rook b8, take this pawn here. It's actually a serious mistake. I should have probably taken the pawn to ensure the file's open. c5 was actually a very good move. So my opponent takes. I go here. I'm going to take this pawn. Basically, I'm trying to force open something. Additionally, now you'll notice there's an imbalance. White has two pawns on the queen side versus one. But if I can ever get these pawns rolling, I can potentially create two passed pawns that just rush up the center of the board. So we have a little bit of an imbalance in the pawn structure here. I'm still going to be up one pawn because I sacked this pawn for one move, but I recapture. Okay, now let's go rook c8 again. I'm desperate to use these open files, like move this bishop, open up this file here. I really need to activate the rooks. Okay, so let's move this bishop. Idea to use this open file to maximum extent with a double stack when possible. Okay, so let's go rook c6. Here comes the double stack pressuring the bishop. Rook d2. I think I'm going to play... Actually, if I go rook c3, this should be fine because I attack the pawn. My opponent can try to push this pawn to f5 maybe. We get king h2. Logical move. What do I want to do? Now, I think the move I'm going to play here is bishop b5. And the reason I'm going to play this move is that it kind of stops this bishop from getting on this diagonal here. Also, maybe there's a bishop f1 later to hit this pawn. There's just a very, very nice square for the bishop right here. So I just like it. I don't really have a great explanation for why I like it, but it basically stops this white bishop from ever becoming an active piece. Because at some point, the bishop needs to go around, like this way or this way. If the bishop ever tries to go around and trade with the extra pawn in this endgame, especially with the central pawns, I should just be winning technically. Now, this is fairly advanced. I'm not going to pretend this isn't advanced because this is actually just straight up endgame. But it is what it is, as the old saying goes. And you do eventually need to learn how to convert these positions when your opponent doesn't just fall apart immediately. You get f5, so I'm going to take the pawn. My opponent will take. Now I go e5. If my opponent takes this pawn, the bishop will hang here on the second rank. Oopsies, rook's under attack. You don't have time to take the bishop because you lose the rook. If you take the rook, I take back, and it's a check on the king. So now I'm up a piece, and I will win this game. Probably in the next couple of moves if I had to guess, but let's see. Okay, so we get rook d2. I'm going to play bishop d3 here. If my opponent captures, you lose the rook. My idea is just to trade off all the pieces here. We go here, trade off all the rooks into the endgame. Yeah, now I will just take. I'll bring the bishop to cut off this pawn. Here we go. Put the bishop back here. And now I've got the two pawns. I just push up the center of the board. Here goes the p. Okay, let's keep pushing the p. There we go. Okay, my opponent resigns. So this game, my opponent played pretty well. The blundering of the pawn in the opening was a big mistake. Back here, a couple of things. First of all, knight c6, f4, and then g6 is completely fine. And we would have maybe gotten something like this, which would have been a transposition eventually back to the game. So move order, not so relevant, I would say, after knight to c3 on move 2. But I always wanted to fianchetto the bishop. So back to the game. Pretty normal here. I played d6. Knight f6 is also fine. I was just mildly worried about e5 hitting this knight here. After knight g4, white can take and play knight g5 here, winning this knight on g4. And white is apparently slightly better in this position. If you don't know how to react to such a move like e5, it's going to be a big problem, because if you were to play knight g8, for example, after rook to e1, probably knight h6 to castle, but now after d4 takes a knight d5, apparently black is actually completely lost already. So that's why I didn't play the move and I played d6, because it stops any of these nasty e5 ideas. And at the grandmaster level, it'll be possible to deal with these situations, but if you're a beginner or intermediate player and you just lose the game because of one of these situations, it's not really what you want. So you want the game to reach the middle portion where you're not just losing the game or in all kinds of trouble. So that's why I played d6. Now we get h3. Now of course there's no e5, so I just take here and I'm up a pawn. So we get knight d5. Probably white should have played d3 here, castles, and something like rook to e1. If this were to occur in an actual over the board game, I would play a6 and b5 here, trying to take advantage of this diagonal. Apparently after knight d5, white is supposed to be slightly better, but just a sample line is something like a3, b5, bishop a2, then e6, followed by let's just say bishop to e3, rook b8, queen d2, and then b4 here, trying to open up this b file immediately. Would be one of the more concrete plans. You could also go a5, b4 here as well, and the game goes on. But this is one of the basic themes, is that generally if you have a fianchettoed bishop here, very oftentimes you're looking to push the p on the queen side as much as you can. So we got knight e5 instead. We got this here. I took with the bishop. Perhaps I could have taken with the pawn as well. That was a big debate, but it would have stacked the pawns on top of each other, which I didn't like. So I took, and now we got queen e2. White had to play bishop to h6, stopping the kingside castling, giving up the pawn. Because if black were to take this pawn on b2 after rook b1, bishop c3, like rook b3, bishop f6, there's maybe like rook e1, and black is actually up 2 pawns here, but the king is stuck in the middle of the board. These 2 bishops are very active as well here. So with the 2 active bishops, the active rook in the center of the board, white has a little bit of compensation. Probably not enough in the long term, but it's definitely not losing immediately. But once we get queen e2, then I castle. Now I've completed the development. I'm simply up a pawn in the center. So at this point, it's pretty straightforward. I could have played e6 here as well, but I didn't really want to stack the pawns on top of each other, even though this would have been good too. So I went here, then I went here. Now, of course, if white were to take, I take, and I'm very happy with the double op combo. We get this. I force the trade, and now I'm simply up a pawn here at this point, and here probably I should have actually just taken instead, and then this way now for sure the files are going to open up here. Black is actually winning. Say a sample line is something like king to f2, and then a move like bishop to d5. If white were to take, there's check, and then like rook takes d5, and not rook d4 takes, for example, and after rook a1, d4 with this very weak pawn, the pawn so close to the end of the board, the rook on c2, black is easily winning. Instead, I played rook fd8, allowing c5, went b6, fair trade for 1 pawn for 1, doubled up, went here, takes. This actually is just lost now. Perhaps white can try something like bishop d1 here, but I'd probably just go bishop d3, and at this point, if white plays bishop to f3, probably rook c2, same kind of idea is very strong. And if white were to play, I don't even know what white plays, rook g2, put the bishop on e4, bring these rooks down. All kinds of stuff is happening here on the 3rd rank, on the 1st rank. Just so many problems for white to deal with, and white will lose the game. We get f5. Now, of course, after the bishop hang, it's lost, but it's already lost because I have the 2 connected pawns that are just going to steamroll up the center of the board. So that might have been a very quick explanation, but we get the win in the first game. So let's move on to the next one. Here we go. So we get the black piece again. Let's play a Sicilian defense. Okay, we get f4. Now I'm going to play d5. In a recent speedrun video, we faced this setup e4 f4 before. I played d5 and knight f6, and we get it once again, which is actually kind of surprising to see. So we get e5. Now this is not what occurred in the previous game, so now I'm going to look to develop my knight. The big question is, how do I develop here on the king side? Because with the pawn on e5, I can't put this knight on f6. So the move I'm going to play here is bishop to f5, followed by e6. Not e6 right away, because if I were to go e6, just to illustrate it, if I were to play e6, the bishop is kind of hemmed in here. No great diagonals. Now I go e6, bishop outside of the pawn chain, very happy. And now I'm going to move my knight so I can recapture with this knight. I'm going to play a6, take back with the knight. If I were to play a6 right away here, white would trade, and I don't really like the pawns on top of each other, so that's why I bring the knight out first. But we got to move bishop to a4. So I'm going to play b5. I'm going to attack this bishop, take more space on the queen side. You get bishop c2. Now the big question for me is, how do I complete the development? The knight's really nice on e7, but the bishop can't really move, so I can castle. Kind of an issue here. I think the move that I'm going to play is I'm actually going to play d4. And the reason I'm going to play this d4 move is that it creates this problem for the bishop that's stuck guarding this pawn. This bishop's very passive. Okay, a4. Let's go. a4 is actually a very serious move. I think my opponent's pretty good. Let's go rook b8. I'm going to play rook b8 here. I'm going to take back with the pawn. The reason I play d4 is to fix this weak pawn, fix the weak bishop that's locked in behind this pawn, and I create space for the knight here to go to d5 and finish my development as well. So this is really a multi-purpose move. It creates the weakness. The bishop is terrible. This bishop has really no scope anywhere now. It's walled in by the pawn. So passive bishop, weak pawn on d3, and it gives me a square to finish development. So we get rook a6. I'm going to play queen c8, kick the rook, guard the knight. I would love to move my knight here right away, but then I would simply hang this knight. So I'm going to kick the rook out of town. Rook's got to go back. Then I play knight d5, bishop e7, and I castle my king, and it's all very hunky-dory. Okay, let's move the knight. Now I'm free to move the bishop, castle the king here. Okay, let's just develop. Why not? Okay, let's keep going. So we've reached the middle game. I have this great knight on d5 that targets the pawn, pressures this one, maybe knight to e3 as a jump as well. My opponent is very passive. This bishop is very bad on c2. It's very passive. Knight, rook, these pieces aren't super active. So now that we're in the middle of the game, I want to think what I want to do here. Now I think the move I'm going to play is rook d8, and the reason I'm going to play this move is I'm really anticipating something opening up on this d file here, whether it's takes or knight to e3. I'm anticipating something happening, so I'm preparing for the inevitable opening of the center of the board. We get knight g5. That's a strange move to me. Maybe it's a good move. Let's just kick the knight back. I mean, maybe the knight's going to e4. It is going to e4, but actually this is a blunder. Or actually no, maybe it's not. If I take and take. Okay, let's take the pawn on c3 here. I'm trying to open up the center of the board. Okay, now my opponent does blunder. Sure enough, the rook being on d8 is going to pay massive dividends, because now I've got a fork of the queen and the rook. If white takes, you lose the queen. Let's take the rook, of course. The material matters. And now I'm going to play b4. And the reason I'm going to play b4 here is that this knight is super passive. You can't move the knight to any of these squares. The knight is dominated. On top of that, I'm looking to push p. I've got a rook with a pawn marching up the board as well. So again, multi-purpose move to dominate the knight and push the p up the board. I could play b3, but then that actually frees up some squares. So I don't really want to do that. So I think the move that I'm going to play here is I'm actually just going to go rook to a8, try and trade off the rooks here. Because once the rooks come off, I control this file. I can infiltrate on this file with the queen. And this knight is just so bad with the two squares being completely unavailable here in this position. You can't go to either of these two squares. Let's go queen to a2, attack the bishop. Bishop d3. That's actually doesn't lose immediately, which is kind of annoying. Let's go here, hit the bishop, hit the knight. Okay, now my opponent blunders the bishop. That'll be the game. My opponent defended reasonably well for a little bit there. Let's take. Okay, now I'm going to go here again. Back to basics. Try to trade off all the pieces. Let's go here. Knight is stuck. All the squares are covered. Yeah, all three squares are covered, so let's just take the knight. Now I'm going to push the pawn, just get the queen at the end of the board. go back. Not super necessary to move the bishop, but again, doesn't really change anything. Go here. Let's move the rook, make a queen. Okay, now there should be a checkmate. Let's go here, king here, there's mate, and there we go. All right, so this game was mostly about the opening. Now, I don't expect many people to play openings like this from the white side, but this sort of situation can occur in many different games. Now, normally if your opponent plays c3, what they want to aim for is to play d4 and build this massive white center. It's actually not a very good move in this position, but normally if your opponent goes c3 and the goal is to go d4. Now, keep this in mind, because when we go through the game a little bit later on here, you'll notice that I played d4. And the reason I played d4, which is, by the way, the best computer move, is say I were to play, I don't know, move like knight g6 to develop this way. At some point, white will go d4, and white will get this bit. There will be this big white center. Now, in this specific position, it doesn't quite work, but in general, you don't want your opponent to get the center. If it's not collapsing immediately, generally white is going to be doing very well. So that's why I played d4 here, because in this position I need to figure out how am I developing this bishop. I basically, like, just to set up the point, I really want to just get this bishop out of the way and castle the king. That's how I finished the development here on the king side. But it's not so easy in these positions where you get these French structures and you bring out the knight to e7 or to h6 or wherever it might go. So it's not always super obvious what to do. But if you get a position like this, and I'll show you guys another variation. One of the systems that I've played a lot actually from the white side is I've played some of these Sicilian lines like c3, e6, and bishop d3, d5, e5, for example. And it's a little bit different because there isn't a bishop on f5 here, but usually black wants to try and play the move d4 if black can't. And it's very similar. The difference being that white is kind of okay in these positions because you have this great wooden shield here, which is active, which is in front of the pawn. Whereas when we look at the game back here, you'll notice, disregarding even this bishop, this light square bishop is walled in. You can't activate the bishop. Bishop has no scope any which way. So generally the structure, if you get a Sicilian where your opponent is trying to build this classic big white center with all the big chains, if you can get this set up with the pawns here, it's at the very least should be good from a structural standpoint for black. So it's worth noting. That is something, again, advanced, very advanced for me. Played many games and understanding all these French Sicilian pawn structures and what I'm trying to do, but what my opponent is trying to do. So don't feel bad if this move seems very illogical to one. But I play this move basically because now the bishop is passive. Bishop has no great scope. You have this weak pawn, which is also a permanent problem, and I create the space for the knight as well. So it's like weak pawn, bad bishop, space for the knight, so I can finish my development on the king side. And that's the reason I played this move. We got this position, rook a6. That's a bad move. Of course, not knight d5 right away, because then I hang the knight and lose the game. So we get this bishop b2. I go here. Now I played rook d8. It's one of a few moves. Apparently b4 is the best move according to the computer, but I thought rook d8 was reasonable. We get this, play h6. Yeah, now I just end up, after b4, it's just very hard. If white trades, the knight is very passive. Knight can't do anything. Also, I've got the rook behind the passed pawn, as I mentioned during the game. It's all pretty much hopeless. Go rook a8. And yeah, now with the two open files, just nothing that white can really do here, especially with this knight that's just never going to get into the game. Bishop's still walled in, by the way, still no scope anywhere for this bishop. So white just has too many bad pieces and white loses the game. So let's move on to our final game of the session. We finally get the white pieces, and let's play e4. Okay, so we're going to get a center counter system, I assume, or maybe we'll get knight f6. So let's go knight c3, kicking the queen. Queen e6. This is actually a bad move. I'm surprised at how many games in the speedrun have featured this move. Feels like people blitz this out and they don't know what they're aiming for. I believe this might not be just losing for black, but it's definitely not what somebody should play. When white goes knight c3 here, you need to go queen d8 or queen to a5. Watch a video, doesn't matter, or queen d6 as well. One of these three moves, but you never look for the check, because the check is basically just hampering the development of this bishop. You can maybe go g6 and fianchetto it, but it's not generally considered great. Let's go d4, looking to fork the queen and the knight. Okay, but now I'm going to go d5. I'm really going to look to punish my opponent here, because my opponent's playing in a way that is wasting time. Okay, and by wasting time here, notice, if my opponent could simply push the pawn and develop the bishop, black would be fine. But now my opponent has to move the queen to try and push the pawn. So we get knight a5, and I think after b4, this knight is just trapped. I cover both squares, no? Yeah, both squares are covered here. And this should just be GG. Okay, so we get takes. I guess I'll just I'll capture with the knight. Why not? We'll get knight c6, I assume. Let's go bishop to f4, and just like that, the game is actually already basically over. Just like that. And this is all because my opponent played this move queen to e6. If my opponent had gone queen back, black could develop the bishop very, very easily. But when you put this queen in front of this pawn, you pretty much are relegated to having to fianchetto the bishop, because when my opponent decides to waste time or make space with queen d7, now things kind of just collapse immediately. And I think my opponent's already in a spot where it's just over without even a fight. We get knight takes b4. Now I take the pawn. Bishop's guarding the knight. Tempted to get cheeky. I'm gonna get cheeky here with knight g5. Try to go for a bunch of forks of everything in this position. Let's see what my opponent chooses to do here. I think this is very close to just dead loss. I take the queen. My opponent has to block with the bishop. I think I'm going to play bishop b5 to try and overload everything in the center of the board here, assuming my opponent does not resign. Let's go here. Let's overload this bishop. Massive pressure. If my opponent takes, I just slide the king away, and then I capture this bishop. It's a good move. Okay, let's just take, hit the king. Just take. Probably I'll take this rook. Now this rook is hanging. I also have rook b1, rook b8 maybe as well. Let's go here. More checkmate, more big checkmate threats with the bishop and the rook. And voila, that's checkmate. So not a very exciting third game. Really, I mean, the basic gist of this game is either you play queen d6, you go queen a5, or you go queen d8, just so that you can very easily develop the bishop and the king. We get this, or we get this position after queen to e6, and now my opponent tries to play e6. Like, my opponent's hoping they'll get time to castle the king. I don't give them that, and it all falls apart immediately. So let's do one more. That was a little bit too short of a last game to end on, so let's have one more game with the black pieces. Okay, let's play another Sicilian. Okay, we keep getting this. This is like third game in recent times I've seen someone play this e4 f4 Sicilian. So maybe there's a new video or something out on it. We'll go knight f6 again. If c4 e6 is good, I covered this in one of my videos that I did in the speedrun, I think 2 or 3 videos ago. So we play e6 here temporarily. I'm down a pawn, but black is actually much better in this specific gambit if white grabs it. I assume my opponent will grab the pawn. What do I want to do here? I think I'm going to develop the knight, develop the queen and the castle. I'm going to hit this pawn, and I'm also going to castle the king very, very quickly here because my opponent has all these pieces that are not developed. Okay, so that's fine. I'll take. Pawn is still under attack. Now the big key is, how do I pressure? Because my opponent's trying desperately to develop. I think my opponent's too slow though here. Yeah, I think my opponent is too slow. Maybe not. Okay, so let's go here. My idea is to play f5 to open up this long diagonal. I also can play rook to e8 as well here. Let's go f5. Want to play rook to e8. I may have misplayed this very slightly, actually. I think f5 was a mistake. But even though I'm down a pawn here in this position, it's going to be very, very hard for white to play. Like, I go knight b4 here. A ton of pressure in the center of the board. There's rook e8 as well. I think the position is about to collapse for my opponent. Now, if I were to play rook e8, my opponent could castle, so I'm not going to let my opponent get that. I'm going to play queen c6 to pin the knight and the rook here. Get bishop e2, and now I'm going to go knight to d3 check, forking the queen and the king. We get the trade, and the game is over here, as you're about to see, because now white can't save this knight or the rook. Either I win the knight, meaning I take, because I have the rook and the queen to attack it, or if the knight goes, that hangs the rook in the corner. So white's going to lose one of these two pieces here, and with it, white is also going to lose the game. Get queen to a3. So I'm going to take this knight, attack the rook. And here I actually have a really cool mate. So I'm going to sack the rook with rook to e3 check, hitting the king. If the knight blocks, I checkmate. And if white takes, I take the knight. It's also a checkmate here. So we take, and that's checkmate. King has no squares available. These two covered by the queen. This is covered by the queen. Bishop, king's in check here. Just GG. Why not? So back to the opening of this game. We got another f4 here. We got takes. e5 was played in the previous game. We got this. Takes, b3, and queen c7 is okay. It's not best. But the main issue for white here is that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces on the original squares. And I've already castled my king. And most importantly here, there is an open file. And there also are a lot of open diagonals as well. So I go here. Played f5, which is a mistake, which I thought, because white could play rook c1 followed by bishop to e2. So like here, white's idea is, say I play king b8, you get bishop e2, and then you get to castle the king. And black's still better apparently because his pawn is very weak. But if white can finish the development, we'll reach a middle game, and who knows what's going to happen. But after we get this idea, you know, queen c6, it's already, I think, close loss of queen b1. Now there's rook e8, bishop to e2, trying to stop everything. And I think knight d3 here. If takes, there's bishop c4 here, hitting the bishop and the king here, and everything is collapsing for white. And if white moves the king to f1, I think here I can just play queen c6, and white has all these pieces stuck on the back rank. You try to survive with king g2. Now there are 20 ways to win, but if with the flashes is to sack the knight, take the pawn. White can't capture due to the pin, and now the bishop, the knight, everything is just collapsing here. White is getting completely hosed down. So we get queen b2. I go here. Knight d3. Now, yeah, you move the knight, I take the rook. If you play rook f1, I simply take, and it's just dead loss as well. I also have rook e8. King can't castle through the check here, so it's going to be over in a couple of turns as well. We get queen a3. I took. We got this, and this allows me this beautiful finish to get another checkmate. Basically, if from the white side, because there probably are people watching this video who do play this, if you reach this position, what I would recommend is that you play the move bishop to b5 check. Trade the bishops on d7 here, and then trade and look to play something very simple like knight to c3, d3 with knight f3 and castling kingside, just to keep the game going. Black is obviously better, but white isn't losing or anything even remotely close to that in just a game between two amateurs. So probably if you do play this from the white side, I would recommend bishop b5, or the same thing with bishop b5 check here. Takes, and like knight f3 takes d3, knight c6 castles, e6, knight c3, and just play chess. That's probably what I would suggest. So, all right, we got a fourth win here with this beautiful checkmate with the queen and the bishop. And I think on that note, that is going to do it for this edition of our educational speedrun series. A couple of these games are actually really interesting. I hope that you guys at home learned something. Obviously, make sure to let me know in the comments what you think of these openings and of these videos whenever you do have the chance. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this latest edition of our educational speedrun series. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we will be back with more great speedruns in the very near future. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your day. See you. Bye.